This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, listen to up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, or give us something to discuss in our new post-credit scenes at the end of each episode, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. Me leading the sync clap every time so that you get it in sync and I don't is like, I hope you recognize that as one of the like graces that I give to you each time.
Right.
Like I know you like clapping in sync, so I let you have it.
Do you want me to do one?
All right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Oh, you're out of sync. This has ruined my day.
Do you know what? I wasn't even in sync on my end either, so I'm probably going to ignore that one.
All right. Welcome along to the Cult Popture podcast.
Hello.
What's this?
This is a podcast, and this is Film Franchise Fortnights. On the podcast where every fortnight is exactly the same, Richard, where we watch a franchise we've never covered before on the podcast, and we do it every fortnight, not once a week. We do it every fortnight, and that format is never called into question for anything. Is that right?
That's right. So today we're talking... Oh, wait a minute. I see what
wait a minute.
Hold up. So normally this is a podcast where we do a different film franchise every 2 weeks, but in order to crap out these podcasts as quick as possible, we
celebrate the 4-year anniversary of Film Franchise Fortnights.
We're currently, this is part 2 of our discussion on the mega franchise, which is combined by a little film called Freddy vs. Jason.
It's arguably combined by Jason Goes to Hell as well.
If there was no Freddy vs. Jason, I wouldn't necessarily...
It doesn't hold water.
Yeah.
The small cameo doesn't hold up. Yeah.
Because, really, we should be doing The Evil Dead then as well. Because that was featured in Jason Goes to Hell. And also, if you see Freddy Krueger's glove in Evil Dead 2.
Imagine if we end up watching a movie that has the John Munch character in it, and we do the entire Tommy Westfall universe as one episode.
Yeah, do you want to explain that?
It's essentially a theory that a bunch of TV shows exist within the mind of an autistic boy because a bunch of crossovers of different characters leads to this map of all these shows that are connected initially through the character of John Munch guest starring in different shows, and one of those shows in the end revealing to have all taken place inside Tommy Westfall's imagination. We should do a podcast on that. We should just do a podcast on that.
Okay. Cool. So this is the Tommy Westfall podcast. You didn't mean now. Okay.
It's called Westfalling for You.
Nice. Okay, so we are doing, to celebrate the 4-year anniversary of this podcast, we're reduxing a franchise we covered in our first year. So
Quack.
4 years ago, if you remember...
Quack.
Reduxing. Very good, very funny. That's what a dux is.
And he says it twice because it's the second one.
We covered the Freddy vs. Jason franchise, and in that time we did it as 20 films over 1 week or 2 weeks, and we watched most of them in one weekend.
Do you remember the time very early on in the podcast? Was it that? Maybe it wasn't that early on. Maybe it wasn't, where I jokingly referred to a fortnight as only being 2 weeks in New Zealand and it's a week everywhere else. And people were like, what do you mean? And I was like, oh, it's just a dumb joke.
I don't remember that's what happened, but what I do remember is when we posted something on Reddit about it, and they were like, oh, I don't quite understand what you mean, but from context it looks like a fortnight is 2 weeks. Or something like that. And it was like, what? And that was when you and I were like, is this not a universally known thing?
Maybe that person on Reddit was himself fooling us, Tom fooling us.
Yeah. So anyway, We did that
Sorry,
then.
I keep putting roadblocks in the introduction.
Yeah, and now what we're doing is, last week we covered Friday the 13th. Go back and listen to that. Very comprehensive overview of that franchise. And this week we are doing A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Which is 8 films. No, did we watch 8? Did we watch 7?
7.
7. So we're doing, next week will be Freddy vs. Jason and the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street remakes, meaning that all up there are 11 Jason movies, 8 Freddy movies, and 20 Freddy vs. Jason movies.
Yeah.
So this week we're doing the 7 unbroken chronology of A Nightmare on Elm Street, not including the reboot, which breaks the chronology, is why I said that. Yeah.
So, let's just start it. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, came out. That's when it came out. I was going to say came out by Wes Craven. It was written and directed by Wes Craven. And what's it about?
Nightmare on Elm Street is a gorgeously simple horror movie plot. A horror movie plot so like that feels so organic and intrinsically linked to the genre that I feel like if Wes Craven didn't do this, it's inevitable at some point in the history of horror movies someone would have made this premise into a movie. And that is, there's a creepy ghost serial killer named Freddy Krueger who can only attack you in your dreams. So
freaky
ghost man. And it follows a group of teenagers who live on Elm Street who, whenever they go to sleep, they are tormented by Freddy Krueger, who, God, it feels so... I feel like I don't need to describe what he looks like, but here it comes. He's got horrific burns, like his skin is horrifically burnt, and he wears a red and green striped sweater, and he has a fedora, and he has a glove with knives on it. And he kills people in their dreams, and the reason for that is because he, in his waking life, in his waking life,
he's dead.
Well, he was a prolific child murderer who, through a some kind of hilarious misunderstanding in the justice system, was not sent to prison, and so all the parents of the town of Springwood, I think. I don't know if that's established in the first one, but that is the town that Elm Street is on. They killed him by burning him alive.
Yeah.
And so now that's why he's all burnt up, and that's why he now is after their children as revenge.
Yeah, it was. It's revealed in the first movie that someone didn't sign a search warrant.
Right.
And that's why he was acquitted.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that they say it's revenge because for killing him. And he gets his revenge by killing their kids, which is what he was doing while he was alive.
Yeah.
So is it still revenge if it's paying back someone for, like, giving you your initial comeuppance, which you already deserved?
Yeah, I think so.
And then the second one's called Freddy's Revenge. The first one was Freddy's Revenge.
Yeah. The first one should have been called Freddy's Revenge.
That's the whole title.
So Freddy Krueger, obviously, the world's introduction to this iconic character. What do you think of Freddy in this movie?
He's a lot less comical in the first film. He still is, but like I feel like by the what is the Scary Terry from Rick and Morty? Yeah. I saw that episode of Rick and Morty before I'd seen A Nightmare on Elm Street film, and he says he calls everyone bitch, and I thought that was a Rick and Morty invention, but it's actually a Freddy Krueger catchphrase. He says bitch heaps, but I don't remember him saying it in the first film.
Interesting. I'm not sure that he does. Sorry.
That's okay. It's not your fault.
Yeah, in this film, he's a lot more like the silent slasher type. He's on screen for like 7 minutes or something in this film. And yeah, while he does taunt his victims and stuff, he's not really quipping in this film. He's more akin to Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. But yeah, the character of Freddy Krueger, the design, a couple of fun little things. At one point, he was considered to have a sickle as his weapon of choice. But yeah, the bladed glove was chosen because one of the Wes Craven was looking into like fears, and one of the things that people are sort of like inherently creeped out by are the idea of like claws
Right.
on characters. It's like one thing that we're genetically predisposed to be scared of. And also the red and green. He was originally going to be wearing a red and yellow jersey, the colors of Marvel or DC's Plastic Man. Because he can stretch, and so it's supposed to be an homage to him. But they decided, he read an article about how the certain shades of red and green, when put next to each other, are like the most distressing color combination to the human eye. So he's like, sweet.
So it's not like a Christmas reference.
It's not a Christmas reference.
Damn.
But also the idea of this film is based on a true story.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So there was this series of events where these Southeast Asian refugees fled from the war and genocide in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, and then would come into the US and refuse to sleep. And there was like a famous case of one was a kid who refused to sleep, saying that the monster would get him. And then they eventually got him to go to sleep, and then they heard him wake up in the middle of the night screaming. Well, maybe not wake up, but he was screaming in the middle of the night, and then they found him, and he had died.
Wow.
In his sleep, and his cause of death was just not being alive anymore. There's no official cause of death. There's sudden unexplained death syndrome and Brugada syndrome. Either of those or a combination of the two. But yeah, it's crazy. They're just like, yeah, something just happened to this kid or these people in their sleep.
Wow.
And apparently it was like, this happened quite a few times, but it wasn't until years later that someone like corroborated all of these events. It was like being reported in the papers like, oh yeah, another Southeast Asian refugee died in their sleep after being scared to go to sleep. They have nothing to do with each other, presumably. And then someone was like, wait a minute.
Well, I think that's what I meant before about it being such a pure premise for a horror movie, is that, I mean, the fact that it has happened in some form, kind of, then it's just based off a true story, but it's such a visceral fear of like your dreams, right? And like, it's such an inescapable thing. Like, sleep is inevitable.
Yeah.
And so that's what's
and you're
so,
defenseless.
Yeah. And that's what's so brilliant about A Nightmare on Elm Street, is that it makes you afraid of something you have to do. You know?
Yeah, it would be like a poop monster.
A poop I was just about to say. Tell you what, I meet a poop monster every time I go to the bathroom. Tell you what.
It's not like you're not making a double entendre. It's a cry for help.
Yeah, please, there is a poop monster.
In my butt. So also the 1970s song Dreamweaver by Gary Wright. You know that song?
Mm-hmm. Dreamweaver.
Yeah, so they provided some inspiration for Wes, and also that song sort of starts with like a little synthesizer riff that's very dreamy, and that was kind of molded into the film soundtrack, or gave him the kind of idea of the oral aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
Two words which do not go together.
Oral aesthetic, I like it.
Yeah,
I like oral aesthetic,
because aesthetic is to do with like it's only the way something looks, right?
Yeah, but by giving it the like notifier of it being oral, you're justifying using the word.
I'm sure there's another word for it though, right?
Like for an oral aesthetic.
Yeah.
Drop a comment below if you have another word for oral aesthetic.
It's sound. The film's sound. It's just the word sound. But also, so Freddy Krueger as a character is drawn from Wes Craven's personal life. He once, when he was like 10 years old, he saw a homeless man outside his window, and he just stared straight at Wes Craven. And that was kind of the inspiration. That's why he's like wears a dirty jersey and things like that. And then also the name Freddy Krueger is named after a bully, Fred Krueger from his school. And then if you watch Last House on the Left, which was Craven's first film, the villain's name is Krug, and it's a shortened version of that same kid. So fuck
poor
him.
Guy. But he regrets bullying Wes Craven now. Well, that's really cool, I think, and because they only refer to him as Fred in the first film as well,
and in the second film, even though the film's called Freddy's Revenge, he isn't called Freddy until the third film.
Wow.
Which
There you go.
there goes one of my main talking points for the third film.
There goes all I had to say about the third film. So what do you think of A Nightmare on Elm Street as a film?
All right, so A Nightmare on Elm Street's an interesting film because if you look at Freddy vs. Jason as a franchise, and we'll probably talk about this more later on, is that A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, is so far and above the best film in the entire franchise, I think.
The first one?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Like the first one is just a really, really, really good movie. And then, but I think Friday the 13th is a better franchise.
Yeah, we talked. I remember we talked about this when we covered it in 2016. As like,
and I think when we ranked it,
as like Jason, the Friday the 13th movies, seldom move beyond their neutral ground. You know, like if the best Friday the 13th movie is up for discussion, whereas the best A Nightmare on Elm Street film is probably the first. Personally, I actually prefer 2 more above the first film, but I can understand that just there's something to be said for the first time a pure premise like this is executed. Yeah. It's the same reason like why we once called American Pie like the quintessential teen sex comedy premise. You know, it's there is something to be said for how pure it is. And personally, I think there's sort of an element that's not really in the first 2 films that gets introduced in the third film, which makes me more attracted to the third film. But we'll get to that when we cover it in 45 minutes or so.
Yeah. You'd still think this is a good movie, even though you prefer other ones?
Yeah. I think it's a great movie. I think I've always struggled with the ending. Yeah. It's a little too talk vague about the for ending. Me. Or should we introduce the characters a bit more?
Yeah, sure.
So there's Johnny Depp in his first role.
Who plays Glenn.
Yeah, he plays Glenn.
Nancy Thompson's boyfriend.
And let's talk about Nancy and not talk about the other main characters.
Yeah, because who cares?
I just wanted to mention Johnny Depp was in
yeah, and so Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp, who is, she's the Laurie Strode, or the Tommy Jarvis of this franchise, or the Not Really Anyone. No, wait. Yeah, no, that's all of them. I forgot I'd already done one for Friday the 13th.
There's Not Really Anyone in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. God, I love her.
Yeah, man, she's got a very she's a very beautiful woman, and I don't want to just be like she looks great. I don't
like. It's not like she's hot. It's like I want to spend the rest of my life with her.
Yeah. It's not she's not sexy. She's beautiful inside and out. Like she has she's just so. She just glows. She's glowing. She's a great addition to the franchise.
she's got a great screen presence, even though I think she's maybe not necessarily the best actor in the franchise or anything like that.
No.
But. Yeah, she's one of those actresses and one of those characters that you immediately buy into as your main character. Like you meet her in the first scene or two, and you go, yeah, you're my. I'll follow you to the end of the earth.
Yeah, I'm with you till the end of the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So her name's Nancy, and so she's the main character, and if all her friends get killed by Freddy towards the end of the film, and then the way she like defeats him, I don't know. It kind of does the thing that the It movies do twice, which I've had a problem with kind of in both movies, where like the solution to beating Freddy Krueger is to
stop
while on his turf, while dreaming, explain to him that you're not afraid of him.
Yeah.
Which maybe there's more credence to that being in a dream, because it's like you can control your dream, but they don't really get into that side of it.
Well, I think it's like, yeah, it maybe could be, because it's literally just like, oh, wait, I just have to not be afraid of you, and she just turns around and Fred disappears. And it's like, I think that could have been executed a little bit better, and you know, maybe it could have just been like the power shift when you sort of realize that this is my dream, I'm in control. But then
it's not a tangible enough final showdown.
Yeah. But then it cuts to the next morning, and then Nancy goes outside, all of her friends, and her mum is still alive, and then she gets into Johnny Depp's car, and then all the top comes down, and it's got the same stripes as Freddy Krueger, and then you see the kids doing jump rope. That's the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Yeah. Freddy's coming for you.
Yeah. That, is a recurring motif throughout the films. And then all of a sudden, Marge, Nancy's mum, just like gets grabbed through the window, and it's like very obviously a mannequin being pulled through. And I gave this film 5 stars when I rated it originally. I was like, yeah, fuck it, this is a great movie, because I actually rated it like a couple of minutes before I'd finished it. And then I was like, yeah, cool, yeah. Like I've seen this movie before. It's amazing. And then the movie finished, and I was like, I gotta knock off half a star, because like I really don't like the ending.
It's so weird, and the fact that Nancy returns in a later film, and it's not really... I mean, she mentions that her mum's dead, because her mum dies in a dream, and then she dies at the end of the first film, but both scenes are seemingly in a dream. So what is real and what is not real?
Yeah, and it's a studio mandated, the killer needs to come back for a final scare. Wes Craven didn't want it to spawn a franchise. Which is crazy when you create such an iconic character. It's like, obviously they're going to want to bring it back. But yeah, they wanted a final scare, and they were like, oh yeah, like have this happen. And Wes said it's one of his greatest regrets is filming it. And then because they had to put it in the film. But he wanted the film to just end with Freddy disappearing when she turns her back.
Yeah, and I can see it's just such a strange note to go out on, and it just muddies the water. I know, like, there's something to be said maybe for it being like, what is real, what is not real. I mean, that's a lot of movies about dreams pull that card, right?
Yeah.
And it's if I feel a bit sheepish criticizing it, because it sounds like it's one of...
Because I don't think you could do better.
No, it's not that. It's like, there have been a few times on this podcast where I've criticized something a film's done for being too confusing, and a couple of times you've been like, oh, right, so you'd rather it told and not showed. And I get how it sounds like that, but there is a balance between something just... something not making sense narratively and something not making sense tonally are two things. Should always make sense tonally. That's the point of tone,
right?
And I think the ending just it leaves you, because it doesn't leave you going like, whoa, what just happened? It leaves you going, what? I don't get it. And that's not something a movie should do, personally, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, if you want it to just tell you what's happening.
What? You're on my side here. You agreed with me.
I appreciate you insulting yourself for me.
Yeah, well, I like to do it before you do it.
Good on you. All right. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Let's go 84, the year it came out.
Oh,
there's me clicking.
Oh, I was wondering what that noise was. No, that's not true. But also, bringing back the body count.
Oh.
What do you reckon's higher?
The score?
You're right, it is. It's higher by 90 points.
Wow. All right, so I probably work out who dies in this movie.
Yeah, go for it.
So there's... does Nancy die? That's the question.
I mean, what?
Because does Nancy die in the dream? I guess she doesn't. Okay, so Nancy has 3 friends. All 3 die. Her mum dies. Freddy is already dead. Does that count? But then he gets killed again? Okay, that doesn't count. Okay, so we're up to at least 4 people dying in the film.
You're right, it is 4.
Yeah.
Yep, so 94 on Rotten Tomatoes and 4, which makes it the highest rated film in the franchise by quite a significant margin. And also, bringing back this week, dumb IMDb trivia. I've got one for almost every film. Yay. So, there's an IMDb entry that says, after almost getting killed in the bathtub, which we haven't talked about, but is one of, like, oh god, it's the most beautiful shot in cinema.
It's the shot we posted on our Instagram. It's the shot from A Nightmare.
Yeah, where
on Elm
she's
Street.
in the Nancy's in the bath. She's kind of falling asleep, and between her legs, Freddy's glove, and that was filmed by building a bath room set on top of a pool, and then cutting out the bottom, and then so that she could actually be pulled down, and yeah, it's insane.
It's so good because it's that kind of filmmaking language I really like, where it's so psychosexual, right? It's like it's scary, it's terrifying because Freddy's in the bath and you know what Freddy can do, but then it's also like the first thing you see is like the camera between the legs of this beautiful woman, and so you're initially attracted to her before, after less than a second you're like, oh shit, and the fact, just the imagery of like a hand between someone's legs is sexy, but it's scary, and it's such a great kind of psychosis kind, like it's so subconscious, like in a way.
Freudian.
It's the same.
It's
yeah,
Oedipal.
that's what I'm going for. It's very, very Freudian, and it feels it's such a cool shot. It's such a cool shot.
It's the kind of shot that if you put in your film, you'd be like, fuck, this is it.
You've I've communicated so much.
Yeah, it's
visual storytelling.
Yeah, it's the upside down kiss in the rain. In Spider-Man.
It's the well, that is psychosexual as well, the upside down kiss in the rain, and also very on the surface sexual as well. But like I've talked about this 100 times in the podcast, but that famous shot from Blade Runner 2049 where the giant hologram Joy is like talking to Ryan Gosling's character, the shot from Blade Runner 2049. I like that for similar reasons, that it's like kind of
the hand between the legs. It's a little bit scary.
She's
gigantic.
demoralizing.
She'll kill us all.
It's demoralizing because she's like talking down to him, and it also reveals a lot about like how fake his relationships have been. But it's also kind of sexy, and the combination of demoralizing
because she's
sexiness
naked.
And it's like there's like a dominance to it that is
sexy.
It's sexy. Yeah.
So anyway, after this scene, there's an IMDb trivia entry that mentions she looks in the camera because and she's stressed out. She goes, "Oh, I look 20 years old," and it's like, Heather Langenkamp was 20 years old when she filmed this. And then below that, there's like, a couple pages down, there's another IMDb trivia entry which says, in her room after almost getting killed in the tub, Nancy looks at herself in a mirror and says, "Oh God, I look 20 years old." Many viewers find this humorous, thinking that Heather Langenkamp was 20 years old at the time of the movie. However, on the DVD audio commentary, she's quoted as saying, "I was 18 or 19. I can't remember."
We may never know.
Yeah, there's actually no way of knowing.
That's true. It's very easy to find out. No, I think I didn't laugh because I thought she was obviously that age. I laughed because, like, who says the line, "I look 20 years old"?
I know, I feel like that's still a fine age to look.
Yeah. I wish I'd looked 20. I wish I looked 20 years old still. Like 20 is like, I would, what, I'll say it. 20 is the ideal age to look. You want to look 20 years old forever.
Depends if you're like an old 20 or a young 20.
The universal 20, what we imagine when we imagine someone who's 20, I think is one of the best ages you could be frozen in for all eternity.
Yeah.
A la Twilight. Let's talk about Twilight. Now.
So Heather Langenkamp was she turned 20 like 3 or 4 days after filming Wrapped.
Right. Cool. Wow, hilarious that she says I look 20.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could go and add an IMDb trivia entry, like another one. All right, so up next we've got A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Sometimes called Part 2. It's called Part 2 in the film, I think.
So that came out the following year, 1985. Directed by Jack Shoulder. Do you want to make a joke about his name, AJ?
I showed her.
Interesting.
Do you like how I went off the beaten path?
Yeah.
For making it
so, what's this one about?
Okay, so this This is like kind of the tried and true how to do a sequel to a horror concept where it's like slightly adjusted from the first one, right?
Yeah,
Where
just
it's,
make it like keep the real kind of heterosexual overtones.
I will get to that, I'm sure. But this one, it's the same thing. Freddy's tormenting the new kid who's moved into the Elm Street house.
Yeah.
But instead of just killing his friends in their dreams, he kills his friends through his dreams. So he essentially uses the main character. What's the main character's name?
The main character's name is Jesse.
Jesse. So he uses Jesse's dreams to kill all of Jesse's friends.
Yeah.
Is kind of the big thing. And while the first film had young Johnny Depp in it, this film has a young Meryl Streep in it. No, it doesn't, but my God, does the main girl in this movie, Jesse's sure to be doomed romantic prospect, is the spitting image of a young Meryl Streep.
I believe the phrase is spit and image.
The spit and image of a young Meryl Streep. You type in her name into Google, the suggested says Meryl Streep afterwards because she looks like a young Meryl Streep at the time of the film was older than what this girl is. How old this girl is.
Haven't you said this on another podcast?
Well, she's in Hellraiser.
She is. She's in Hellraiser Bloodline. And I seem to remember you making the same claim. But yeah, no, you are right.
And I'll claim it again, Richard. Next time we watch a movie with whatever her name is.
Kim Myers, if you want to Google her.
Yeah.
When we finally get around to watching, I don't know if she's in any other franchises.
So the most interesting thing about this movie is, and we just so briefly scratched the surface when we covered this in 2016, and it's so interesting now watching it.
Also, sorry, before we get into this, there's like the kind of big thing in this movie as well that purists of the franchise sort of find a bit strange is how Freddy gets pulled into the real world and kills a bunch of people at a pool party.
Yeah, in a way that like it's always uncomfortable when horror movies just bring the supernatural into a certifiable realm where everyone so now it's just a fact. It's just a fact that enough people can corroborate that that magic exists. So yeah, what the most interesting thing about this film is that somewhat unintentionally, I believe,
depending on who you ask.
Yeah, it has kind of become a pillar of queer cinema, queer horror, because the guy who plays Jesse,
Mark Patton.
Yeah, he's playing the character as if the character is in the closet.
Is closeted, yeah. So the actor Mark Patton is gay.
Right.
And so the writer intentionally wrote a lot of homosexual subtext into the film. And so there's a lot of things about, because Freddy's essentially possessing him, and so there's kind of the parallel of like having this thing inside you that you don't want to reveal to people. And like you said, the sure to be doomed relationship, not because there's a serial killer on the loose.
Because, honey, Meryl, I'm sorry.
But also, like, so the director made this very gay film and didn't realize any of the homosexual subjects. And like you said, it's now become this kind of pillar of queer cinema, because I think also there's a certain element to how oblivious people were to it. And like... The Wikipedia page has a whole subsection called homoerotic subtext, and if you're interested, and I'm interested, I've been meaning to watch this for a long time, but it sort of just came out, is that Mark Patton released a documentary called Scream Queen, which is a very good title.
That is good.
Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, and so it was kind of about, because I think the filming wasn't too great for him, and originally he was in the closet actor in Hollywood at the time, and he was now the face of this homoerotic horror film, and it was torturous time for him, but he's sort of learned to deal with it along the way, and now he's become a gay icon essentially.
Right. And knowing that a bit, because I didn't know that the first time we watched it, though we both kind of picked up on that subtext the first time we watched it, and watching it this time and seeing it as that, seeing it as like this quintessential film in queer culture, it's so much better because knowing that
man.
it's so cool. It's such a cool film. And like there's a part where him and the Meryl Streep girl, what's her character's? Just tell me her character name.
Sorry, her character's name is Lisa.
Lisa. It's where Jesse and Lisa like, you know, nearly have sex at the pool party in this changing room, and like knowing that the character is supposed to be gay, or is at least being played as a gay person by the actor, it's like, yeah, this sex scene looks very uncomfortable for both of them. It looks very unnatural, and that adds to it so much. And like, yeah, and the horror aspect of having something inside you that you don't want, that you're ashamed of, is so rich. It's so thematically rich, and there's the shot I put on Instagram from this movie is when he like screams and the camera shows inside his mouth and you see Freddy's eye at the back of his mouth like looking around, and it's so deep. It's such a deep movie when you look at it as being in this allegory. However, I was like watching it knowing this time, I was getting to the point where I was like, this is kind of way more interesting and complex than the first film. And I was like, shit, I'm going to end up really liking this one and have to justify my controversial opinion that A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is the best Nightmare on Elm Street film. And then that scene happens where Freddy gets brought into the real world and attacks all the people at the pool party. And I was like, this is dumb. This is such a bad scene.
I don't think you have to pretend to like it more in an attempt to seem woke.
Fuck you, man. No, it's just genuinely like any like, and it's not like the first film doesn't.
It's one of those things. It's
either,
like
but...
Friday the 13th 5. Is that when you explain it to your friend, it's a lot. That's a lot more interesting than the film itself.
That's true. And in contrast to Friday the 13th, how we were talking about like what's the point of the movies, of the Friday the 13th movies, and how they seem to lack any character arc or point to what happens in them. The Nightmare on Elm Street films have character arcs,
too
absolutely. No, but so there is already that depth to them that immediately, in my opinion, just objectively makes a better film. I think anyway. And so maybe that isn't objective, maybe it's subjective. So sue me. And so I guess I'm not, especially confident that I could describe what the themes of A Nightmare on Elm Street 1 are about. But having that insight into 2, even though it's unintentional, which is even cooler, like it's way cooler when a film means something by accident, it makes it a deeper film to me. It makes it a more interesting film to me. But that one scene it taints the film. So it's like the first one. I mean, the first one has a tainted scene as well, but it's right at the end, so you can kind of just conveniently ignore it, much in the way that 3 kind of does. But it's annoying because until that scene, I was like, this is real good. This is such a cool film.
And also because like the kills, so someone gets killed by giant balls, which is obviously again is like a Freudian thing, and then his like gym teacher gets killed by being stripped naked, like tied up spread eagle in the shower and like towel whipped on.
It's so clearly gay. I would love to like see a scene of like some like conservative like homophobe being like Friday the 13th 2 rocks, and then someone's like, it's actually about. It's actually got like all this.
Like saying that to the director, like "fuck, this is a good movie,"
and he's like, "What do you mean?" And
the scenes are all gay, and they're like, "What?"
It's got all these scenes of like a naked man being whipped in the showers and stuff, and it's like, no, oh god, like it's all there. It's all so obvious now. It's like that scene in that Simpsons episode where he finds out that his friend's gay, and then looks at Bart and he's like, "Zap!" It's a zap moment.
Well, like I described it to you as the whole film is like the same episode of The Simpsons when they take him to the gay steel mill, and it's like Jack, why did you make a gay horror movie? I don't know.
Oh, man. That episode of The Simpsons, by the way, if you're looking for media about dicey subjects that isn't actually that tasteless, that episode of The Simpsons, Homophobia, I actually think I'm not gay, so maybe I can't speak for it. But to me, I watched that recently and I was like, you know what? Compared to like, I don't know, Friends or other shows from the same era, it is respectful in a way that I feel still stands up today.
Yeah, that's season 8, episode 15, if you're looking for it. And I mean, it does feature John Waters, who is like, a queer icon. But yeah, it's a very interesting movie to watch, and this is the kind of thing that college courses would be taught on. You would go to there'd be like a queer cinema thing, and there'll be a class on Freddy's Revenge,
because you know about like readings. You know what a reading is?
The cinema.
So in cinema studies, no, but similar. So a reading is the kind of the academic practice of explaining a movie's themes through a certain perspective, whether they were intended to be that way or not, right? So Lindsay Ellis has the whole plate where she explains, it's a series where she explains Transformers through different readings. So she has like a communist reading of Transformers and a feminist reading and a queer reading of Transformers. Yeah, so this is an example of that, of like a queer reading of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is very rich and interesting, and you'd get a lot out of doing that, I think.
But so it is interesting, as a sequel, so like Nancy doesn't come back or anything like that. And apparently it was like, Heather Langenkamp was asked about it, and she was like, yeah, I was never asked about coming back for the second one. And New Line apparently just never thought to ask her. Because I think by this point, the idea of what a horror franchise should be is like, yeah, cool, you have your final girl, and then she dies, and then so that established that like you would had a few Halloween movies already. This came out the same year as A New Beginning, I think. The
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th, and so it's like, that we had all these ideas of what a slasher movie should be. But also I think apparently they thought it was the whole Freddy coming into the real world and possessing someone was just way too different of a movie that it wouldn't make sense to tie it to the first one, character-wise.
And what it creates is this was one of those fascinating sort of franchise anomalies, right? Similar to The Incredible Hulk in the MCU, where it feels so detached, because the other 6 films are all intrinsically linked one way or another through characters, and this is like the outlier. This is the only Nightmare on Elm Street film that you could pluck from the canon and not impede the narrative cohesion.
Yeah. Also, back to just the homoerotic subtext thing as well. I think it is worth
please.
I think it is worth mentioning that it comes from a place of preying on the homophobia of the sort of primary audience of these kind of films at the time. Like in the early to mid 80s, the kind of guys that would round up their friends and go see the latest slasher movie would be terrified that something gay would happen to them.
Yeah,
and I think that's like a thing, which is interesting. That it's kind of sad, but it's also like quite interesting.
Well, it's sad depending it is sad anyway, but whether or not it's ethically or morally good or bad, it depends on what reading you're doing of it. Like if it's told from gay people, then it's like,
because it's like, is it good that it's like, you're making money from these homophobes, but I am scaring them. Don't worry. Like,
well, no, I more mean like if you look at it from the perspective of someone who tried to write it as a story about a gay person, then it's like almost a tale of suffrage, right? And kind of points out the silliness of being homophobic. If you look at it from a director who had no idea, making gay scary on purpose, then it's bad.
Yeah. He's just directing. He's like, man, this film's terrifying, but I can't figure out why.
Zap.
I do just one little piece of fun behind the scenes trivia which I believe was mentioned on the first time we did this podcast, but that was years ago. Who cares? You mentioned there's the shot where his mouth opens up and you can see Freddy's eye looking back and forth. So that was done by making a dummy of Mark Patton's head with a hole for the eye to look through. And then that part was put on a flat surface and someone could be able to put their head into the opening. But the only person whose head fit was the girlfriend of the special effects designer. And so it's the only time in the franchise that Freddy is portrayed by a woman.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's like how Kane Hodder got to play Freddy by having he was the arm from
Right,
and Jason Goes to Hell.
Very nice.
Yeah, so what do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes, and what do you think the body count is?
Okay, so the first one was 94. I'm going to take off maybe 40% of this and go 54.
Oh, yeah.
What is it?
43.
43. That's a shame. I think it's better than that.
Yeah.
And
body count.
Body count is quite a lot. Body count, I'm going to say 10.
11. And it is the highest in the franchise, so you're right in saying that's quite a lot. And here's some dumb IMDb trivia. This one's not even that dumb. It's just like when people trying their darndest to find, tenuous links to things. Brad Pitt, John Stamos, and Christian Slater all auditioned for the role of Jesse. John Stamos ended up playing a character named Jesse in the TV show Full House and Fuller House.
And Fuller House. That means someone's updated it since Fuller House came out.
Like since we recorded the first time.
Very good. Very good stuff.
All right. So that brings us to A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Came out in 1987, directed by Chuck Russell. And this one is kind of noteworthy because it brings back Heather Langenkamp, and also it was written by Wes Craven, who had nothing to do with the previous film. But yeah, it was written by the director, Chuck Russell, and Wes Craven, and also it was Frank Darabont's first writing credit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. What's this one about?
Well, this one, we've had a young Johnny Depp, a young Meryl Streep. This one has a young
Lawrence Fishburne.
And Patricia Arquette, who play characters in this. So it is about Patricia Arquette is a character named Tina.
You're
is
gonna
she
make
Tina?
Me look these bloody things up.
It just helps to explain the movies when you have the names.
No, her name is Kristen.
Kristen. Tina must be a different character. So Kristen is being tormented by Freddy, and it results in her waking up to find that her wrists have been cut, and so she's sent to an asylum, with similar people who are also avoiding sleeping. And you find out it's because Freddy is kind of tormenting all of them. And then Nancy shows up, now an adult with a PhD, maybe? I don't know. She's like a doctor. She's like a therapist.
Yeah.
And turns up to sort of counsel these teenagers through being attacked by Freddy Krueger, where she kind of teaches them to lucid dream. And they become dream warriors. And there's another part in it where the doctor who works with Nancy learns that Freddy Krueger was conceived when a nun was locked in a room in a insane asylum with 100 mental patients who all raped her, and so the idea is that Freddy is the child of 100 lunatics. It says something, or 100 maniacs.
Yes, the bastard
like
son
that.
of 100 maniacs.
There you go. Which is why he's so evil, and the only way to stop him from invading dreams is to dig up the charred corpse that Nancy's dad and the fellow parents burned and buried in a dump, and move it to hallowed ground
and lay him to rest.
And so he goes and does that while Nancy and the what's left of the teenagers who haven't been killed in their dreams sort of go and attack Freddy in their dreams because they have superpowers when they're dreaming. In the end, they move Freddy's body. Nancy's dad dies. Nancy dies. And that's sort of what happens. That's the end.
Nancy gets stabbed, and then she ends up stabbing Krueger with his own glove as he kind of is laid to rest. So, very good. Thank you. And Lawrence Fishburne is like an orderly at the hospital as well.
Yeah.
So this is the first big bitch we get as well. This sort of marks a transition in the character of Freddy Krueger, I think.
Right. That's what you meant.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is the first big bitch we got, and I was like, Richard, what do you mean the first big bitch we got?
Patricia Arquette.
That's a huge bitch.
Yeah. So there's like possibly Freddy's most famous one-liner when he picks up a girl and slams her head into TV and goes, "Welcome to primetime, bitch."
It's great. And that is actually my favorite death, I think, in the series. And brings me, if I may, it brings me to why, for a long time I ranked. New Nightmare is my favorite, but we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
This was my favorite until New Nightmare, and I think, and it was a toss up. I was like, is this? It's better than the second one because it doesn't have a movie ruining scene.
Yeah.
But is it better than the first one? And I think what drew me to being like, yes, it's better than the first one, is what this movie does so great is its prosthetic effects, and the dreams are the best they've ever looked.
Yeah, it's one of this is the first one like where it actually really takes advantage of the fact that these are dreams.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's the best one, is because it takes that concept and perfects it in a way where there's so many practical effects. The TV death is like she's standing in front of a TV and arms come out the side of it and grab her, and then Freddy's head comes out the top of the TV, but he's like stretched behind latex, and he just pulls her head into the TV. And there's another one that's like a big green worm man, and the art direction is so cool, and this is a filmmaker's movie, I think.
Yeah.
Like the filmmakery in it is so admirable. And I kind of also like Dream Warriors. I remember seeing this in the VHS store, the video shop, as a kid, and thinking that Dream Warriors was such an incredibly lame name for a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. And I agree it is, but it also kind of gives an indication for what's unique about this movie, is that it's got all this horror movie DNA, but then it also is being like a almost never-ending story-esque fantasy movie, you know? And there's not a lot of movies like this, like where it's both like unabashedly scary and also unabashedly cheesy and inspirational. And is about, like, it's not just Dream Warriors because they have dreams, it's all the imagery you would expect with something with dream in the title. It's Dream Warriors, like it is like that. And I think that's really cool.
I think it definitely benefits from having Wes Craven back, and it's amazing how just having an incredible writer director like Wes Craven and Frank Darabont as well in the writer's chair, how much they can elevate a film.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as well that that this is the ending. This I almost wish I could combine a Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and Dream Warriors into one movie, because I think the conceit that you have to take control of your dreams in Dream Warriors is what should have been the ending of the first one. Is like they work out they can do these things, that they can actually control their dreams themselves. And if Freddy can be an all-powerful dream weaver in your dreams, then so can you. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree. This is definitely like it's the best sequel, I think. And yeah, the TV death is cool. It also has probably the most like horrific death in it. When one of the characters who's known for like sleepwalking, he gets like his tendons ripped out, and so you see them like come out, and so he's got just tendons coming out, like essentially to the point where he looks like a marionette. And so he's got his tendons coming out of his feet and his hands, and massive gashes on his arms, and then he's made to walk and leap off a building. And
it's very scary.
The imagery is horrific.
I feel like this is the one that looks most like the pop horror novel covers. You know, because like all the posters for these movies look like Stephen King knockoff novel posters from like the 80s. And I feel like this is the first one where aesthetically it looks like that as well.
Interesting. That's a good point.
Mm.
Yeah, there's you might have noticed, since we're so familiar with the franchise, that before that TV death, did you know what she was watching on TV?
What was she watching?
Critters.
No shit.
Yeah. There's another New Line property because, we talked about New Line last week, actually. It's worth mentioning, so this film did quite well. This second one, I think, performed better than they thought, but not like amazingly. And the first film was New Line's first success, and so that they sort of joke that New Line is the house that Freddy built.
Right.
Which means that A Nightmare on Elm Street is directly responsible for us having the Lord of the Rings movies.
There you go. The real Nightmare on Elm Street.
Because they were the only studio that agreed to it. So
the real Nightmare on Elm Street. I was going to say the real Nightmare on Elm Street was The Hobbit 3, but that was after a bunch of legal disputes, which ended up not being produced by New Line. So never mind.
So originally, Wes Craven was he came back because he wanted to end this series on his own terms, and his original pitch was actually that Freddy would enter the real world and would be, stalking the cast members of a new Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Wow.
Yeah.
That maybe one day we'll see
unfortunately, he never got to do that.
The one thing I would say I don't like about this movie, and it's handled very well in this movie, but it becomes one of these classic slasher horror movie tropes that we've seen time and time again. I really don't like when the main character from the last movie dies in the next movie. It's just so miserable to me. And Nancy dies at the end of the movie, and it's very sacrificial, and it's kind of earned. But we'll see in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Patricia Arquette, who's recast in the fourth one, she dies maybe a third of the way through that. And it bums me out because it ultimately means Nancy died in vain. If she couldn't protect... Like, the whole point of Nancy's death is that she's protecting these characters, and then they all fucking die in the next one. It removes the nobility from the entire point of the character in that first movie, Yeah. And I remember in the Halloween sequels did this as well. Like, the little girl from Halloween 4 gets killed as an adult in Halloween 6, and it's just really like, oh, fuck! Like, there was so much riding on her. There was so much, and
also how we meet this little girl, and then a film or two later we see her naked. It's like we've grown up with her.
And I mean, Friday the 13th 2 does it as well with Alice. I don't know. I just don't like it. I think it takes away from a character arc. And
there was originally, and it's briefly hinted at in the film. They mentioned we'll still get to see her, don't worry, or something like that. That and it was going to be more explicit that essentially now that Nancy had died in the dream world or whatever, she was now going to haunt the dream world as a guardian angel for the dream warriors.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's Nancy would live on like that, and so that would have been. I would have loved to see that. Now you might remember a couple of years ago, a little film came out called The New Mutants.
Not quite.
Well, but yeah. So apparently this film was cited as a massive influence when making The New Mutants.
Oh yeah.
Which sense. We'll see if it ever comes out, and we can comment on that.
Do you know what? I hope New Mutants never comes out. I hope I never see it.
There's the shot in the trailer that does the same kind of latex coming through the wall effect that's done a couple of times in this franchise. Also, fun little crossover fact. The Friday the 13th game has things you can collect, and you and I feel very differently about these kind of things. But collecting tapes throughout throughout worlds, any post-apocalyptic game, you've got little notes you pick up or tapes.
Best part of the game.
Worst part of the game. But yeah, you pick up the Tommy tapes, and the tapes from Tommy Jarvis, and it's implied that he went to the hospital in this movie.
Wow, that is very interesting. Cool.
Yeah, because just trying to keep all those little connections.
You've got to.
Yeah. There's a funny quote I read that was all about like how everyone fell in love with Patricia Arquette. It was her first film, and everyone was like, and Robert Englund was talking about, who plays Freddy Krueger. I don't think we mentioned him yet. He plays Freddy Krueger in every film. He was saying, everyone knew she was going to be a star, and most of the guys in the cast had a crush on her and would come to me asking for advice on how to ask her out.
And then I asked her out. That would be creepy. The real Freddy Krueger is preying on vulnerable young actresses. That's the real Nightmare on Elm Street.
All right. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about this movie?
No, just that I really like it, and it absolutely, it's where the rest of the series follows, is this movie. Like, this feels like the franchise starter way more than the first two. Similar to how, same with Friday the 13th, actually, as part 3 feels like
it took 3 movies.
Yeah.
So what do you think is higher, the Rotten Tomatoes or the body count?
Rotten Tomatoes.
You're right. The Rotten Tomatoes is 74. The body count is
9?
6. Now, so dumb IMDb. I've actually got 2 for this one.
Ooh.
One, just because it's an IMDb trivia about dumbness. For the dream sequence, so this is the Welcome to Primetime bit. She flips through the channels. I mentioned she's watching Critters, then she switches over to the Dick Cavett show. For the dream sequence in which a Dick Cavett interview is interrupted by Freddy Krueger, Sally Kellerman was originally in the script as the guest, but Cavett was then allowed to pick the person he'd be interviewing. He picked Zsa Zsa Gabor because he thought she was the dumbest person he'd ever met in his life, and he'd never have her on his own show in real life. So if there's one person he'd want to see killed by Freddy, it would be her, and she plays herself in the film.
That's great.
Also, so this starts with I can't remember what it's called, but where they put like a quote at the start of a film. Yeah. And so it says the quote attributed to Edgar Allan Poe, which is "Sleep, those little slices of death, how I loathe them," is highly disputed as actually being from Poe. However, there is still a chance that Poe could have just said the words.
That's true, though. There is still a chance. Yeah. My favorite IMDb dumb trivia is the one where the response to it can be, "That is technically true." It's just, I don't know why you needed to say that. Yeah. It is a chance.
It's like he may not have come up with it, but he might have said that at some point.
Or just he might have said it to himself and it was never recorded. Technically, that's possible.
Yeah.
But you could say the same about...
You can never prove that he didn't say that.
Literally anyone in the world, you could have the same argument for.
Yeah.
Jesus actually said that, maybe. You can't prove he didn't.
No, Jesus famously loved sleep.
Did he?
Slept for 3 days.
Oh, good point.
Okay, so next we had A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, which came out in 1988. It was directed by Rennie Harlan. And what's this one about?
So this one is about, what's this one about? It's like there's so all the characters
following on from the Dream Warriors.
Yeah, all the characters from the last one are around, and they sort of start getting killed off by Freddy now. But there's the kind of main story is that there's a bunch of high schoolers, and there's this one girl whose name is Alice, I think. Is that her name? Yeah. And she the kind of wrinkle in the formula for this one is that she is... So I mixed this up with 2, actually. This is the one where Freddy uses her dreams to kill her friends. 2 is where he uses Jesse's body itself to kill.
Yeah.
To kill people. So yeah, that's sort of what happens, and... Yeah, Kristen dies, and they all come back to try and help, but ultimately it's just up to Alice to try and save the day, and she does. Yeah. She defeats Freddy in the end.
Well, in very kind of loose terms, we have the Dream Warriors all have like their powers, and then the Dream Master, Alice, like gains each of their powers
as they die. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so she goes up against Freddy Krueger. Thank you for that. That is the main thing about the movie, isn't it? And it ends with she shows him a reflection of him.
Yeah,
and it destroys.
And because we see under his jersey,
yes,
and he's got all these little faces in there.
Yeah, like the Craig, start the reactor thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? What movie is that from? Start the reactor. If people listening to it get it, it's from Total Recall. Look up Total Recall, start the reactor. Oh my god, it's 2 minutes 30. I'm not watching this now.
Yeah, so they kind of they attack him from inside.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, she like inspires them all to fight back. And yeah, this one, I think this one is maybe like there's a thing we don't really talk about with horror movies. I think we talked about it a bit on the Scream one. Which is like, while all the story is happening, you're also dealing with like a community like absolutely shaken by the death of a bunch of people. And so horror movies often deal in that kind of macabre mood. Like in real life, if one person dies, your whole year is probably going to suck. But if this is like 5 of their friends die or whatever, it's like, this is the...
It's like, I gotta get to class.
Yeah, right. And so it is there is kind of that problem where it's like, people keep dying, but the contrivances of the plot means they kind of aren't allowed to dwell on it that well. They have to just kind of move on to get the story going. And I found this was like the saddest one. Like, this is the one where like the characters who survived the last movie died, and as I said, that's kind of an issue I have. It's one where like her mother, Alice's mother, is already dead, and then her brother, who is like her safety net from their alcoholic father, gets killed as well. Some really just sweet, nice characters who are part of the friend group get killed, and it's just really grim. And it makes me sad, I guess. But the practical effects are killer in this one.
Yeah, this has what I once would have called the most horrific kill. And actually, probably, no, fuck, it still is.
Fuck it, it still is.
Yeah, fuck the tendon one. When Freddy turns a girl into a cockroach and traps her inside a roach hotel and crushes it.
But he turns her into the cockroach in the sense that she's like, it's like she always was the cockroach and her human body was the vessel. Like she bursts out of herself.
She's bench pressing, and then Freddy like pushes it down until her like elbows break, and that's horrific to watch. And then these fucking, cockroach legs unfurl out of it, and then she tries to escape, but she's got cockroach arms. And then she falls over, and her face falls in that like gooey, sticky shit, and she's like screaming, but her face is like attached to the ground, and it's fucking horrific. And I saw this. I mentioned this the first time we covered it, but I saw this like at a friend's house on Sky Movies like years ago, like in early years of high school. And I was horrified by it.
I wrote a letter to the Broadcast Standards Association.
Yeah. But yeah, and that was like one of the worst things I'd ever seen up until that point. And that put me off watching for these films for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a time when I was thinking like the idea of Nightmare on Elm Street just terrifies me. And it still does. I think the whole thing of like the dreams and being inescapable.
Yeah.
Terrifies me. B, what do you think of this film generally? What
okay, so again, the practical effects. It's still that if you're a filmmaker or you love filmmaking, there's still a lot of meat on this bone to be like, this is so cool how they did this. But the story is nowhere near as good as the Dream Warriors, and so this and the next one I think are the weakest ones in the franchise because their story is just kind of lame, and this is where it gets to the point where it feels like you're dragging it out. And things like, all right, okay, it's the same. We're locked into a method now where we make a Friday and a Nightmare on Elm Street film every year or every couple of years. This is how you do it. These are the beats it needs to hit. Like, it's
okay, that's interesting because I disagree somewhat, and that's my. I still don't like the film. Don't get me wrong,
and that's my God-given right to disagree with you, AJ. And you know what, Richard, I may disagree with you back, but I'll defend to the death your right to disagree with me.
Thank you. And this is why I think that Friday the 13th is a better franchise, is that Friday the 13th, and the shitty sequels, it's like you've still got this kind of the constant that you can latch onto, which is that it's going to be Jason's going to come back in some convoluted way, and then he's going to kill a bunch of people and then be defeated. And that's why Jason Goes to Hell doesn't work, because it changes that formula so much. Whereas, and that's, I think, why we like Jason X more than Jason Goes to Hell, because even though it's still that kind of like campy bad quality, it's still got this constant to latch onto. Whereas when A Nightmare on Elm Street is almost trying to be too clever with each of its sequels, and it's like the log line of the film is different. It's not just like, yeah, Freddy does end up killing people, but that's not like the hook of each film. It's like, so Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is like, yeah, these people are stalked in their dreams. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is about like a group of people at a mental institution discover they have powers in their dreams. And then the fourth one I find to be like the worst of the good ones. And then Dream Child is like, I guess, the bad one. But yeah, I don't know. Like it feels like they're trying to be too clever, and there's less stuff to latch on to.
Is that not good sequeling though? Should sequeling not be the art of subtly reinventing something so it's just new enough to justify? Being its own thing?
That's what I'm saying that Friday the 13th does. They reinvigorate it just enough. After a certain point, the first few are interchangeable, but they just sort of change it just enough. But whereas when you do that and it's not good. It's when you change it so much. Yeah, when you change it so much and then it's not good, it's bad. Like, so Dream Warriors works because it's like, wow, this is such a new thing and it's a good movie. And then when you get like, and here's a whole new thing on top of that, and it's not as good, I don't find it as good, and I find it hard to kind of sink my teeth
if
into.
anything, I feel like the series would be better if Dream Warriors was more of an anomaly, and it was like, this is the real fantasy wizardy one, and then the fourth Nightmare on Elm Street should have tried to be more like the first one than the third one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although maybe I'm wrong, because this was the highest grossing film in the franchise until
but
Freddy
that's how
Jason.
sequels work.
Yeah, the one after the good one. So also this one, apparently Wes Craven, it was like writer refusal kind of thing. The studio said initially they approached Wes for an idea for the fourth film, which they always do. They go to him first. And they said his idea was illogical. It was about time travel within dreams that broke all the rule of dreams. We decided not to go with it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is Wes Craven is the voice I trust more here, and so he's the one with the best interests of story progression in mind.
Yeah,
so that sounds like a really cool idea.
If time travel works and he can do it, if I can go for it. There is a little bit of time travel, use the term loosely, in this film. There's a bit where they're on their way to save someone and they keep running around the same corner.
It's the cockroach death, actually.
Yeah, right. And they realize that they're stuck in a timeline. I think that's Robert Englund's like favorite part of the franchise, he said.
Well, it's very confusing when you're as sleepy as I was watching this film, and that happens, and I'm like, did I rewind? I literally like checked my phone to see if I'd accidentally like tapped back on the YouTube rental I had of this film. Which, by the way, all of the Freddy vs. Jason films are on YouTube except for fucking New Nightmare. How infuriating! It was so annoying.
But that was one of those things that really felt like a dream, I thought.
Yeah.
And the other bit that feels like that, I think, is, and it's used again in New Nightmare, actually, is in the first film when Nancy is trying to run upstairs and the stairs are like filled with pancake mix.
Yeah.
And she like her feet keep sinking into them, because there's something about not being able to run that feels.
You know the song by is it Naked and Famous, Punching in a Dream? Yeah. So the lyrics there, like, it's like punching in a dream, breathing life into a nightmare, and that's what like I always interpreted that song to be about, how when you try punch someone in a dream, nothing happens, and it feels like you've got no power behind your punch.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Like, you either, if you're having a good dream, and I fucking always loved this growing up, when you would run and then my strides would get longer until I was like, leaping
tall buildings in a single bound.
Pretty much. And then essentially it just turned into flight.
There you go.
And Yeah, God, it feels so real. God, I just want to go back.
The only dream I ever remember having that was like really fulfilling, and I woke up feeling great. Was
it a wet dream?
Yep.
Was it actually?
So I slowly walked into this conversation being like, do I want to talk about this? It was a very sexy dream, and it happened to be a wet dream, but it was also just a very
Jesus
nice
Christ.
and genuine and romantic sexual encounter with a girl that doesn't exist in my dream.
Yeah.
Where's where's the real nightmare on Elm Street is that was all a dream and didn't actually happen.
Damn. That's beautiful.
Do you think no, we'll talk about that when it comes to titles. Remind me when we talk about titles to talk about what I was just talking about now.
Yeah. So, Rotten Tomatoes and body count. What do you think we're looking at?
Okay, body count, it will be the maybe like 10, 9, 8.
So the body count?
Yes.
It's 6.
I thought there'd be more for some reason.
Rotten Tomatoes?
32.
55.
Stupid.
Yeah, but remember that number.
I've already
32.
forgotten it. I think you meant 55 was the number to remember.
All right, and time for some dumb IMDb trivia.
Da, da, da.
In A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, Kristen falls asleep and awakens to a house with a little girl on a tricycle. The child asks Kristen what her name was. She tells her name is Kristen and asks what the child's name was. In response, the child just giggles. The same actress who played the child in the film was also casted... That's what it says, casted. In Nightmare on Elm Street 4, this time playing on the sand on the beach. In this scene, Kristen asks the girl what her name is. The girl replies Alice, but in real life, the actress's name is Kristen.
What the fuck are you talking about? Isn't this 4? Isn't this Nightmare on Elm Street 4?
Yeah, it's very confusing. Yeah.
That's the worst piece of trivia I've ever heard.
Okay, cool. So now we're moving on to A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. I'm often without the 5, actually. And this came out in 1989, directed by Stephen Hopkins. And
The Hops.
And what's this one about?
So this one follows Alice, and it's years later, and she's getting her dreams are being filled with Freddy again, and she's like, what? How could this happen? I thought we dealt with him. And it culminates in a bunch of her friends getting killed, including her boyfriend who survived the last movie and is now killed in this one. But she finds out that she's pregnant with her boyfriend's child, and kind of the crux of the film is that Freddy is actually intercepting her unborn baby's dreams, but
is able to like pull her into the dream world without her realizing it, kind of thing.
And you see Freddy as a baby. You see very disturbing scenes of his conception. You see all sorts of things like that. In Alice's dreams, you meet a maybe 6 or 7 year old version of her son. And he's played by the shitty little kid from the start of Jurassic Park that Dr. Alan Grant explains the raptor claw to. He's got these beautiful big eyes, and in this movie, which came out before Jurassic Park, he looks like a cute little kid, whereas in Jurassic Park he just looks like the kind of kid who just grows up to be like a douchebag and is just a little asshole at 12. I didn't actually look this up. It just looks like him. It's just how I recognized him.
Oh, wow.
And so that's kind of it. It ends with her turning... Does she turn... Somehow figure out how to turn Freddy back into a little demon baby.
And Amanda Kruger reabsorbs him.
Yeah. Weird, but I do prefer this one to 4, just because I like to me, the idea of Freddy intercepting the dreams of a fetus is... I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I
that's
think
about
this
the
is
only good
actually
thing
my
about the
least
movie.
favorite.
I mean, it's one of my least favorite ones. It's I think second to the end. But yeah, I don't know. I just like that idea. It's you see baby Freddy in it a couple times, and it's very funny. It makes very little sense because Freddy's not supposed to be. This does what what Friday the 13th Jason Goes to Hell does, where it's like it turns him into a demon.
Yeah.
I mean, the third one kind of did that by explaining how, that he's the bastard son of 100 maniacs, but this is a bit more like, I just don't like that he's like, you see him get bored and they're like, this is, that we got to get rid of this horrible demon baby. It kind of like, as the more you make Freddy Krueger some kind of divine supernatural evil, the more the purity is distilled of it just being of that original.
Yeah, he's a lot more
movie.
interesting as like a the Killing Joke kind of thing, where it's like all it takes is one bad day.
Yeah,
where he was driven to do this by being killed by the parents of the town where he was killing kids.
I mean, he was already killing kids, so he had some bad day earlier on, and was maybe born a psychopath.
I think it would have been probably a more interesting choice if Krueger was innocent as a human.
That is an interesting choice. Interesting.
And so it is very much like, you wronged me and I'm taking it out on your kids. And then that's less like, because then you don't have the same sympathy of like, oh, it's vigilante justice, but at least they killed a child killer. It was like, fuck you, these parents fucked up.
That is better. That's what it is in The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, A Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace thing with groundskeeper Willie, which I watched this week as well.
I've been meaning to.
But yeah, so that's about the most, like, this is the one I probably remember the least. I imagine it's probably the one we'll talk about for the shortest amount of time. It's like the whole interesting thing is that he intercepts the baby's dreams, and that's really the only notable aspect of it.
It's like it's got a very low kill count, and there's one where he like there's a lot of like take on meing in this film, where characters get put into like an animated world, and yeah, it's very strange, and low kill count, and so even though they're maybe the highest concept kills we've had, they're not that memorable. Like a person getting turned into a comic book and then getting slashed and the colour falling out of them sounds really cool and clever and high concept, but it's so unmemorable it might not even be in this film. It is in this film.
Yeah, it is in this film. There's something very similar that happens in the next one. And so that's right. Yeah, so there's a comic book enthusiast who like writes about Freddy Krueger. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Do you want to just move on?
No, well, not necessarily. If you have more to say about it, then go ahead. But this is the like end of the line. Like, this is the point where it's like, you have to change something, or else I don't want to see any more of these movies.
Interestingly, though, it is you say the end of the line. This was one of, if not the last slasher released in the 80s.
Well, there you go. There you go.
There I go. Digging in again. All right. Do you remember that number that I asked you to remember?
32.
Yep. And what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes is?
55. AJ. God damn it.
You're right. It's 55. No, it's not. It's 32. Can you guess what the audience score is?
55.
It's 32 as well. And what is the kill count?
Maybe like 4?
3.
Only 3 people die in this movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. It does feel like an absence of deaths.
Wow.
Although, and it might seem like we're moving on very quick, but I've got 3 pieces of dumb IMDb trivia for this one.
There you go, filling out the quota.
Which is making up for, spoiler alert, I don't have any for the next film. I'm sorry. No. Do I have one for New Nightmare? Yes, I do. Okay, so if you were a Nightmare on Elm Street fan looking at that poster in 1988 and 89, you were probably curious about what the heck Dream Child meant, and what was going on with the fetus and the crystal ball and Freddy's glove. Well, the people making the film thought the same thing too. That poster came out before they actually had a clear idea of what the movie was going to be about beyond its premise and title. I just like that it's so like personally written.
But also, like, that is just, I mean, the crystal ball's maybe a little left field, but, like, it's perfectly appropriate to have a fetus as imagery in your poster for this movie.
Yeah.
The real piece of trivia there is that they got the poster first and worked backwards to make a story around that.
Yeah.
That feels like that's what the trivia should be.
So this is the fifth Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Just keep that in mind. Nightmare on Elm Street 5. And this is the trivia entry. This is the fifth the fifth Elm Street film that shows nudity of any kind. The other films are A Nightmare on Elm Street, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Freddy vs. Jason is the sixth film. So the real fact here is that the sixth film doesn't have any nudity, and it's the only one. But it is interesting though, because like thinking back, I don't remember nudity in these films.
I remember in 3, one of the quiet characters, is lured into a dream by a sexy nurse who gets naked.
Yeah, they're more like, and I think they're maybe using nudity looser than the Friday the 13th films would be. I don't think every film has explicit like breasts. But yeah. Okay, now we're on to the final film of the franchise, clearly, because it's called Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Came out in 1991, directed by Rachel Talalay.
A lady!
Yeah, a lady. Who also, fun fact, has directed like a few other things. She directed a few episodes of TV. She directed the second / the best episode of Doctor Who, and I'm not talking about Blink, the one good episode of it. But she's been on as a producer like the whole time as well.
So what episode of Doctor Who did she direct?
She directed an episode called Heaven Sent.
There you have it. The 2 good episodes of Doctor Who, everybody.
Yep, Heaven Sent and Blink. Heaven Sent is he's the Doctor, it's Peter Capaldi, and it's just him. It's just after his companion has died. And that's a real good episode.
Nice.
Yep.
Cool. Well, great. What's this movie about, Richard? I've done all the talking. I've explained all the plots. Why don't you explain the plot for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare?
Okay, so we didn't even mention in the last film, Freddy was brought back to life by getting pissed fire on by a dog. Or was it in the fourth one even?
It's like worse than any of Jason's resurrections.
Yeah. Okay, so it's set several years later. Freddy comes back and starts killing people on Elm Street. There's the line about every town has an Elm Street, which is like, fuck, what a deep line. It's like Homer's where the heart is, you know? Like Elm Street
represents fear and terror.
It represents fear. But what he actually means is that it's a very common street name, and really most towns do have an Elm Street. There's actually one just around there that's like a couple minutes away from my house. I looked it up after seeing this.
Wow.
But kind of the sort of where this film ends up is that they go into the dream world, and they're kind of like, they go there with a mission because they realize that they can pull out things from the dream world. So one of them, just because they've set an alarm, just as he's about to wake up, he grabs part of Freddy's jersey and he's still holding it on. So they go, let's bring him out into the real world and we can kill him here. Sorry, I've forgotten a whole part of this.
Yeah, you're like the main thing about this film, and then said something I probably wouldn't have even mentioned.
Yeah. So
all right, let me take it back. Let me take back the responsibility of explaining the plot. So essentially, it follows a young man who's got amnesia, but he's running away from Freddy and is tormented by Freddy. They go to Springwood, which is the town that Elm Street is the titular Elm Street is from, and discover that Springwood have banned children from living there. So like the entire town has kind of gone crazy because all the children would die if they stayed there. So children no longer live there. They turn up, and because they are teenagers themselves, they get sort of picked off, including the young man who learns while he's there that Freddy had a child before he was killed, and he's like, oh my god, I'm the child. And then it turns out that he's not the child. The child's actually his like psychiatrist who's been along for the ride.
Yeah, which is a great moment because it has the whole the classic like, you can't kill me, I'm your son, and he goes, no, I just needed you to get my daughter, and then he kills him.
Yeah. And so that's sort of, well, that takes up most of the movie, I think. Breckin Meyer is in this movie, the same caliber as Johnny Depp and Patricia Arquette and Lawrence Fishburne. Maybe he is the same caliber as Lawrence Fishburne.
No, he's fucking not. Who does Breckin Meyer play in The Matrix?
Wasn't he Neo? It ends in a segment which I'm pretty sure was supposed to be 3D.
It was originally released in 3D, yes.
Freddy Vision.
Yeah, Freddy Vision, yeah.
And yeah, they bring Freddy out into the real world where his daughter kills him and then ends the movie saying, Freddy's dead. Meaning that the title of the film, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, is not like a clever play on the premise. It's not like it starts with him dead and then he comes back. It's just straight up a spoiler for what happens at the end of the movie.
Yep. This film also features a few cameos from some famous faces.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp appears, although he's actually credited as Oprah Noodle Mantra.
Why?
I don't know, just as a joke, and also Tom Arnold and Roseanne Barr, who were married at the time, credited there and credited as Mr. and Mrs. Tom Arnold, and also for the second time in 2 weeks, the sixth film in a horror franchise features a contribution from Alice Cooper, Alice Cooper of He's Back, the Man Behind the Mask fame, plays Freddy's dad in this film.
Huh.
Yeah, so we see a bit of Freddy's upbringing. We see him being teased at school because his mum was raped hundreds of times, and the kids are like, nah, 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 nah.
And he responds by hammering a hamster.
Yeah,
something which doesn't seem to shock anyone in the room because they're too concerned with making fun of his
how
trauma.
Hilarious his upbringing was. And then we see him older, and he's like cutting himself, and then his dad comes in, and I was like, "I'm gonna whip your son." And the dad is Alice Cooper.
Ah, cool. And then you also see Robert Englund without prosthetic effects on, just playing Freddy Krueger before he was killed.
Yeah.
Where like you see him with his daughter, and you see that he kills his wife when she finds out about his child murdering secret. And yeah, so this. The some of the deaths in this one are pretty interesting. Breckin Meyer gets teleported into a video game in a very cheesy scene where Freddy's like controlling him and eventually kills him. There's a character in this movie who is deaf without his hearing aids in, and he gets killed through like he has like hearing related death.
Yeah, Freddy replaces his hearing aid with something that makes his hearing super sensitive, and Freddy essentially tortures him. And this is Robert Englund's favorite kill in the franchise. And so he's like standing on like a ledge above him, and he drops a needle down, and you could hear it. It sounds like a bomb's dropping, and the guy's like screaming because it's so loud to him, and you know that this needle falling is gonna fucking do his head in. And so he manages to catch it, and then Freddy's like, oh, and drops like, 100 needles down, and it's like bombs dropping, and it's so loud to this guy, and he's screaming, and then Freddy shoves like a giant Q-tip inside and like impales his brain. And this might be one of my favorite kills in the franchise as well. And for me, it was so especially terrifying because of like an audio based nightmare. Because you've shared a story of a dream you had. Dream I had growing up. This is like a reoccurring dream I had, and it sounds so stupid, but I can still like hear it so clearly in my mind. It would be like this. It was like completely black, and there was like a bed floating, and it would be like a little small, like a little like Lego sized bed, and it was wrapped up in a chain that was like dental floss kind of thing. And then that chain would break, and it would be like a little noise. And then like a bigger bed would show up, and that would be chained up with like a thicker chain. And then that would break, and it would get louder and louder and louder until it would be the gigantic bed with like gigantic chains. And then that would like break, and it would be like this deafening sound that I was terrified of in my dream. And I'd be like lying in bed about to fall asleep, and I would see this bed covered in a chain. And I like would be scared because I knew that the big one that had made that loud noise was coming.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can I share a nightmare that I had when I was younger?
Sure. Was it a wet nightmare?
No, it was a dry nightmare. This is something I must have had this dream when I was like 6.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that like the description isn't that scary, but the experience was. I remember it started, and me and my mum were just walking through this forest together. And then somewhere along the dream, me and my mum we were replaced with 2 cartoon vampires. So I don't mean like someone replaced us. I mean at the start of the dream it was me and my mum. By the end of the dream, I was a vampire with another vampire. Right? So we just changed into these other characters, and we laid down on the ground to fall asleep. And while one of the vampires was asleep, the other vampire sort of talked to camera, quote unquote, and revealed that he was going to betray the other vampire. And then he flew away. And the last thing I remember in the dream was the vampire you thought was asleep suddenly opening his eyes with a shocked expression on his face. And then, because he'd heard the whole thing. And the shocked expression of the vampire was very terrifying.
Mm. It's weird how things like that stick with you, eh?
Yeah.
So, what else? We talked last week. Yeah,
the 3D sequence. Shall we walk through that a bit?
Yeah. So she gets given a pair of red and blue 3D glasses, and is told put these on because you'll still be wearing them in the dream, and in the dream they can do anything. And so it's very obviously like a put your 3D glasses on now kind of moment.
Yeah.
And then it's the last like 10 minutes of the movie. I presented in Freddy Vision, and it's just like dream shit. But then she comes out of the dream.
In the story, do the glasses she puts on even do anything? Like he says, they can be anything, and then they don't really do anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, they make it 3D.
Yeah, but it's already 3D for her.
Yeah,
I don't know what I want from you, dude.
Yeah. Anyway, it is interesting though. We talked about. I don't know. Did you have anything else you want to say about the Freddy Vision sequence? It seemed like you had a lot to say.
No, not really. I just felt like it was very funny. It's very like, wait a minute, like something you recognize as being 3D without being told it's 3D.
Yeah. But we talked last week about the misogyny of the Friday the 13th, or potential misogyny. This film is directed by a woman, and no women die in this film.
Wow, the opposite of misogyny.
Yeah. And also, Freddy doesn't kill anyone with his glove.
Interesting.
Yeah. Although he is killed with the glove.
Wow, that's a nice little touch. I don't think this is a bad movie. I think it's all right. I've
this is the Jason. This is considered the like Jason Takes Manhattan of the franchise. But and while I may concede that it's technically like it is the worst one, it's definitely not the one I enjoyed the least.
Yeah, I ranked it 5th. So
did I think.
It's better. So it's better than 4 and 5, which might not sound good, but I'd still regard it as a perfectly pleasant.
It's a perfect movie.
A fine movie. A fine film.
Would you?
Maybe. What's it got on Rotten Tomatoes?
What do you think?
50.
20.
Okay.
And the body count?
5.
I've got one here, but I might just quickly double check it. It's 6.
Oh.
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Yeah, so that is Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. But wait, that wasn't The Final Nightmare, because 3 years later, in 1994, Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out, which was directed by Wes Craven. And what's this one about?
So this is a meta sequel that exists outside the realm of the first of the
outside the realm of possibility, really.
So it's about like it's set in the real world, and Heather Langenkamp is doing a press tour for being for the 10-year anniversary of Nightmare on Elm Street or something, and it culminates in sort of she starts getting dreams about Freddy. She's got a son and a husband now. Her husband is killed in a Freddy-related car accident where he falls asleep at the wheel.
Her husband's a special effects artist, which
Mhm.
is actually in real life. Her husband was a special effects artist.
Is that her real son as well?
I do not believe so.
And so she goes to Wes Craven, starring in his own movie, where he explains that Freddy Krueger is actually, or rather that there is a demon, an evil that exists and has existed for the dawn of time. And since the dawn of time, storytellers have been able to capture this evil in their stories and have kept it from doing any real world damage. And now that the Nightmare on Elm Street films inspired Freddy Krueger. Well, like that, Freddy Krueger was a manifestation of that demon, and now that the films are over, the demon is just out and about. But he's kept the form of Freddy because he likes that form.
Yeah, which is a funny little like.
Yeah. And so, it's about Heather Langenkamp, who I was thinking, is she like one of the least famous people to ever play herself in such a significant role in something? Like, she's not a household name.
She's no John Malkovich.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny that she just plays herself for the nature of the film to make sense. And it's a lot of it is about her son. Like, her son is seeing Freddy as well.
Her son Dylan, whose name is said 103 times in the film.
Wow. And it sort of ends with her having to save her son by tricking Freddy. They end up back in the first film in a dream sequence, and they eventually kill Freddy by burning him in a furnace and getting out alive.
Yeah. Only to then go on to make Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah, in a seemingly eternal feedback loop. This is my favorite one. I really like this movie. I think, if anything, I would say, what does it come down to? It's just Wes Craven is a better director than anyone else in the franchise.
Yeah, that's why the first one's my favorite.
But yeah, and I get that as well. Yeah, and so it's between them, I guess. But like, my flatmate watched this with me, and he didn't really like it. He was like, "What did you like about it?" I was like, "Just the direction's better." Like, Wes Craven's just better at this than anyone else.
Right. So why is it better? Why is it rank above the first one then?
I guess because it's a more experienced Wes Craven.
Right. It feels like you want to be cool by saying this one's your favorite, but I'm not.
I do want to be cool.
I'm not hearing concrete.
Well,
reasons.
I think maybe it might just appeal to my interests as someone who's into filmmaking and pop culture. Is like, it's fun to watch a movie that is about this subject. I think it's kind of unabashedly silly. And Freddy looks really cool in it. They kind of redo his design.
Yeah, he's got a green fedora now. He wears a trench coat, and he's got like whiter skin. Yeah,
his scars look a lot more fresh. And yeah, just the fact. I mean, I'm like the Academy dude. I like films about Hollywood, and this is one of them, and I find it interesting. Unlike the Academy, though, I'd like to think I'm not horribly racist and sexist.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this film is my favorite on paper, but I don't know. There's just something about the film that doesn't quite reach the heights of the first one. I mean, it's like half a star behind the first one and my actual
Fair
ranking.
enough.
But yeah, it is. It's funny. It's weird seeing because you say it's so unabashedly silly, but I think it takes itself quite seriously, and it's interesting for a real meta film to see. I've never seen it done so seriously.
Right. Yeah.
That it's not like, yeah, we're making a film about the films. It's like, this is a film about the films, you know.
Sure.
And because this predated Scream by 2 years.
And it feels like so much of the ideas in the Scream sequels feel like they had their origins.
And also, I guess, because I actually watched Scream this week as well. So every film I watched this week was either directed by or based on a movie by Wes Craven. But yeah, it was like just I think ideas explored here are perfected in Scream.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's just something about it that just doesn't quite elevate it to to that place. But you know what? Hey, more power to you for it going the extra mile for you. But it's
Thank
funny
you.
though that like this came out like how far the franchise went between the original film and here, and it's a space of 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Like imagine if Inception had 5 sequels of varying quality, and now Christopher Nolan came back this year and was like, I have to do a film about making Inception. Like,
yeah.
like that's how recent the film was. Like, but to it feels like a decades later kind of thing. But like the fact that the franchise was run into the ground over 6 films in just 10 years, that it then had to be like reinvigorated just to have the final say.
Heather Langenkamp would have only been 29.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man, I agree, and I think that's such a strange kind of aspect of it. But I do think what's cool is like there's like a better trilogy hidden within the series. Like if it was just a Nightmare on Elm Street, a Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors, and New Nightmare, that would be a really interesting trilogy if that was all we had.
Yeah,
I think. Although I guess it wouldn't work with what a New Nightmare is about.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently Johnny Depp was supposed to make a little cameo at the funeral. But Wes Craven was too scared to ask him.
That's strange.
Yeah, he was intimidated by him.
If anyone shouldn't be scared to ask actors to do things, it should be a director.
Yeah, it should be the person who you're the only reason they're famous.
Yeah, yeah. What the hell?
But yeah, no, and then they ran into each other later on, and he said, "You should have asked me. I would have done it. I would have been happy to."
And he was like in Freddy's Dead briefly.
So that was like generally considered the worst one. Like he can stand in the background of a funeral shot. Yeah,
I really like seeing like Robert Englund just be a wonderful man, like a lovely guy in this one. Like he's just a really supportive friend. There's a part where she calls him up to tell him about how she's feeling like she's being haunted by Freddy, and
because she's got a stalker as well. Which she had in real life.
He goes a little dark, and he's like, it reveals he's painting something horrific, and he's like, I can't hang out today, Heather. I'll talk to you later. But there's a real funny part where she's like, I've been having dreams about Freddy, and he's like, about Freddy? Okay. And she's like, yeah, but he's different. He's and Robert Englund goes, darker? And she's like, yeah, how'd you know? And he's like, lucky guess. It's like a lot of context clues here. Like it's a very broad guess, actually. How did you know? How did you know from the tone of my voice that something was more wrong than it may have seemed? Like it's such a funny line. I loved that part.
It's funny as well because obviously Robert Englund is playing himself and the kind of new version of Freddy Krueger, but he's in the credits. Freddy Krueger's credited as playing himself, which is a fun little thing.
I do like that.
Yeah. I did like seeing Robert Englund play himself. But also, it's interesting. This film was like, it was always had earthquakes in the script. But this actually ended up becoming, like just after filming or like during filming, there was a massive earthquake. And it's actually in, Dave Chappelle released a new special over the weekend called 846 about everything going on with George Floyd and police brutality. And he mentions in it that he mentions near the start he recalls a story and happening in 1993, and there's a massive earthquake, and that's actually the same earthquake he's referring to.
Wait, the one that happens in the movie?
No, like the real one I'm talking about. So there's always earthquakes in the script, but then a massive earthquake actually ended up happening, and then the day after watching this movie, they used footage from the earthquake. Dave Chappelle uploaded the special where he mentions the earthquake, which I thought was interesting.
Right.
But yeah, they this earthquake actually happened, so they sent out a second unit to go like film all the destruction, and they used it in the film.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Right. What do you reckon this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I reckon this would be quite high, maybe like upper 60s.
You're wrong.
What is it?
80.
Nice. I like that. It is. I mean, it's Wes Craven. He's back, and it's like it also doesn't This was the last one until a reboot, and well, I guess Freddy vs. Jason, but like it's this cool little thing. It feels like an appropriate ending for the series.
It's the Rocky Balboa of the series.
Yeah, and it's cool that they never went back on that. Well, I guess they did. I don't know what I'm talking about. Like that canon. No, I can't even say that. I was going to say like the next one's a reboot, so the canon ends, but they do dive back into the canon for Freddy vs. Jason. I guess.
Oh well, you tried. Dumb
failed.
Oh, sorry. What do you think the body count is?
12.
4.
Not a lot of people die in these movies.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Dumb IMDb trivia. It just says the only Nightmare on Elm Street movie where none of it takes place in Springwood. There is no capitalization and no punctuation. And it's like, of course, it doesn't take place in Springwood because it's not fucking real. All right. So, there's a thing that we do a lot on this podcast, and that's talking about titles. We do it so much, in fact, that we created a segment called We Talk About Titles a Lot on this podcast, because we talk about titles a lot on this podcast. So here is, we talk a lot about titles on this podcast. So, AJ, we talk about titles a lot on this podcast.
Yes.
And what do you think of the titles of these ones?
So we talked a lot about titles. What?
You last week said that you hated A Nightmare on Elm Street as a title.
Yeah, okay.
So why don't you talk about titles a lot on this podcast?
Yes. I may have changed my opinion somewhat. So I sort of talked about it in context of Friday the 13th being a title for that franchise, which seems very irrelevant to the story, while there's like better titles laying right there they could have used. And I said I felt similar for Nightmare on Elm Street. And I think I remembered it wrong. I think I don't mind the title now. I think initially I was just like, the Elm Street part is so irrelevant. Like
it should just be called Nightmare.
Maybe it should be. And I think you go like, that's
or like if it was like A Nightmare on Elm Street and then Nightmare 2, Freddy's Revenge, and they just kept Nightmare.
I don't love that, but like
that feels like what they should have done though. Like it feels like what I would expect them to do.
Yeah. And you might think that Nightmare isn't anywhere near iconic, but like remember, there's a film called Alien. You know, there's a film called Predator. There's a film called Alien vs. Predator. And so like there is place, especially at that point in film history, for just like very easy titles for horror movies.
Yeah, like Halloween.
Yeah. So like Nightmare is maybe a better title for a franchise, but I forgot how relevant Elm Street actually ends up being in the series. And I think because it's never mentioned by name in the first film, I was always I think that was like, I misremembered that being as they never mention Elm Street in the whole series, which isn't true. They're always talking about the Elm Street kids, the last of the Elm Street children.
They fucking won't shut up about Elm Street.
And the only one that really doesn't have anything to do with Elm Street is New Nightmare, and it's not called that.
Yeah.
That still has Elm Street in it.
New Nightmare is a great title as well. Because it's not just New Nightmare, it's Wes Craven's New Nightmare, because it's about Wes Craven has started having nightmares again.
And I think that maybe there's room for expansion here. Like maybe A Nightmare in Springwood would have been better, just because it kind of feels like they have to. Well, okay, name the town something cooler then.
Elm Street.
Doesn't have to be Well, my point is that it's not just contained to Elm Street; it's contained to the town and not the street, isn't it?
Make in the sixth film, he's just like, every town is Springwood.
But,
and he doesn't mean that like, oh wow, yeah, it's a place of fear. It just means it's a very common town.
Nancy lives across the road from Johnny Depp in the first film. Her boyfriend. It feels just kind of contrived that she would live across the road. It feels purely because they have to set it on Elm Street, and then they keep returning to the house.
I feel like that's a pretty petty complaint.
You're right. It's fine. It's a good title.
Do you think no one's ever lived across the street from their boyfriend?
I'm saying I think it was a story decision born out of needing to set it all on Elm Street.
It's a good title.
So it is a good title. I like the sound of it. Maybe it could have been... Maybe the first one's A Nightmare on Elm Street and the sequels are A Nightmare on something else.
Yeah.
I feel like I always suggest that, but it's
you do. Yeah, I would be happy with A Nightmare on Elm Street Nightmare 2, Nightmare 2 Freddy's Revenge, Nightmare 3 Dream Warriors, Nightmare 4 Dream Master,
Yeah.
Like I think it's if they do it like they decide on that on the second film and they stick to it, that's reasonably neat, and I'm happy with it.
Okay, fair enough.
And then New Nightmare works quite well as well.
Yeah. So I had a suggestion before I said when I was talking about my wet dream. I was like, remind me of this. I reckon Friday, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 could have been called A Nightmare on Elm Street Wet Dreams. I had this thought over the week where it's like, it kind of plays into, again, the homoerotic subtext of it. But I guess it's probably too filthy.
Well, because he ends up at a pool party. So
that's what I mean. Like, it's a very wet movie. And so I think that's a better title than Freddy's Revenge, but I'm saying this presuming Wet Dream was maybe more of a obscure term in the 80s, which it probably wasn't. I don't know why I thought that. But I don't know. I think that's a cool title for a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. Yeah. If you give it kind of a double meaning, call it Wet Dreams.
Nice.
Nocturnal Emissions. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Nocturnal Emissions.
God, I haven't heard that term in so long.
And I feel like I have to mention that one of them's called Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which I don't love, but feels, I guess I'm warmed to it by the fact it kind of parallels like the later Friday the 13th.
Yeah, even though they didn't have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have anything else before we move to continue the franchise and whatnot? Do you have anything else you want to say on the franchise as a whole?
I wanted to talk about Freddy Krueger. Because...
All right, so continue the... No.
because Freddy... like, when we talk about this, like, kind of...
We talk about Freddy Krueger a lot in this podcast.
Well, we don't, but we talk about the kind of classic horror movies we cover on this podcast as almost like a sub-series of the podcast itself, Like, there's the podcast, and then there's the classic horror movie episodes, There are Treehouse of Horror episodes.
Yeah. They're not canon.
But Freddy really makes me realize that, like, the other big ones, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Leatherface, they're all the same guy. They're all the same thing.
Yeah,
Freddy Krueger feels like the most original idea. Like, what is the difference between Jason Voorhees and Can Myers?
The mask.
It's the mask.
And the man behind the mask, and whether or not he's back.
They have the same mannerisms. The only thing I can think of is you maybe see Jason move more than Michael Myers. But personality-wise, they both seem exactly the same. I would accept that Leatherface is a bit more of a caveman type character than the others. But Freddy Krueger feels like... I think that's why Freddy Krueger feels like the best one of them, and why A Nightmare on Elm Street is the most original one of them.
My answer to your question of what's the difference between them would be, Leatherface is more of like a caveman. He's simple. That's his thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand what he's doing. I would say Michael Myers is more like a scalpel, whereas like Jason is like a machete, Like, I'd say Michael Myers is a lot more methodical, whereas Jason is just like stab, kill, key, ma.
And then, of course, there's Pinhead as well, who's different enough that I didn't need to mention him.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just wanted to point that out because I feel like we hadn't really pointed that out yet as like all these iconic horror franchises, but it kind of feels like three of these characters are very similar to each other in a way that means that, I don't know, maybe we should just need to point it out. I don't know. So that's mainly what I want to talk about.
Nice. Well,
and I've talked about it.
All right. So continue the franchise. So what I'm going to talk about, there's a bunch of comics and novelizations and fan films and whatnot. There's Dylan's New Nightmare, a fan film coming out. What has the kid that played Dylan in New Nightmare? It's actually him, the same actor.
Cool.
Because I guess fan films just get the same actors, like that's the thing. But so a few films that almost happened, which I thought was interesting to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's John McNaughton was approached to make a film called Nightmare on Elm Street First Kills, which would have been a prequel to the first film, which apparently would take place mostly in the courtroom, addressing the legal side of his real murders.
Fun. Sounds cool.
Yeah. And then John Saxon, who plays the cop, Nancy's father, the cop in the first film, proposed a sequel where Freddy is framed for his original crimes by Charles Manson. And then the film was called How the Nightmare on Elm Street All Began, and he completed the treatment for it and sold it on eBay.
This sounds... What? You sell it on eBay? That sounds bad. That sounds like an actor who doesn't know how to wrote something. How the Nightmare on Elm Street All Began. That's fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's pretty stupid. Robert Englund also submitted ideas for sequels. He pitched one for the third film, which would have been the character of Tina, who's the first victim in the original film, would see her sister solving some of Freddy's crimes. I don't know what that means exactly, but there you go. He also put forth one which would been about children who had been told the story of Freddy and later developed their own nightmare versions of him, which is kind of interesting, like how someone hearing about Freddy would picture him, that kind of thing. And then there's one I think I mentioned last time, which was an original pitch for A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Dream Lover, which was Peter Jackson.
Oh.
Pitched a meta sequel where was set much later, an old worn out Krueger is like teens would take sleeping pills to go into the dream world just to beat him up for fun.
That's so good.
And so it'd be like about how the villain's not scary anymore and stuff. And it's like, obviously, they would reignite his strength somehow and unleash him again. But
that's such a cool idea.
That's quite a fun idea, yeah.
That's the best original idea Peter Jackson's ever had.
Yeah. So I also found out today there's a Nightmare on Elm Street reality series which almost aired in the mid-2000s, called A Nightmare on Elm Street: The Real Fears, I believe it's called. Real Nightmares, sorry. And it's essentially just Fear Factor, but hosted by Robert Englund.
They Revenge of the Nerds guys did that.
Yeah. And then there was also, we mentioned last week, there's Freddy's Nightmares.
Yes, the TV series.
Yeah, which is the TV series. And so this is like a Twilight Zone-y kind of thing. I think there's like 44 episodes and 6 of them, I think, or maybe even less than that, feature like Freddy. Like the Twilight Zone-y kind of stories about Freddy, but he does like interstitials in all of them in character. And the first episode actually was directed by Toby Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's the court case of Freddy Krueger.
Oh, so it's that idea that was pitched before.
Yeah, it's the prequel, and so it's it's all about what happened, and it's in that, because I mentioned in the first film, it's revealed that he wasn't. They didn't get a search warrant, and so the evidence wasn't. And this one, he wasn't read his Miranda rights, which is why he was let off. And then, so it's like the parents going and killing him.
So, when did the show air?
This show aired in the 90s, I think.
Before or after New Nightmare? 44, like, there's so many episodes. Both the Friday the 13th show and
88 to 1990.
Okay, so before. It's right in the middle of them. Wow. Holy crap. Like, both the Friday the 13th show and the Nightmare on Elm Street show feel like shows that go for 6 episodes and get cancelled. Like,
and most people don't know about them.
Yeah, we don't know about them, but they went for such a long time, but I've never seen... I don't even know what the show looks like. We should watch that pilot episode for Film Franchise Follow-Ups.
Yeah. Apparently, I think it might be quite hard to find because it's like only they released like 3 episodes and then it didn't do very well, like on DVD. And then but the El Rey network, Robert Rodriguez's TV network, has been playing it since 2015. So I think they might have played all of it. Might be able to find it online.
Sick.
All right, what do you have for Could You Do the Franchise?
I am pitching a Saturday Night Live sketch in 2010, which and I'm presuming this didn't happen because 2010 was when the reboot came out. But I want to see... So Robert Englund hosts Saturday Night Live. And it's a parody of Inception that combines the two rules of each of those universes.
Right. So what
together.
you're pitching is the Lawnmower Dog episode of Rick and Morty.
What is the... I don't remember.
The Scary Terry episode,
Oh, right.
which is also a parody. It's a parody of Inception and A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, I'm pitching it 5 years before that episode aired. So
3 years.
yeah. So there you go.
So you got it first.
No, okay, so it does exist. So that's interesting because it just feels like such an obvious thing that didn't happen. I mean, it did, I guess. So I don't know. Well, whatever. It already happened. So my idea's invalid, but that's all I prepared. I guess I just think that the rules, because they're actually conflicting rules, because in Inception, if you die in your dream, you wake up. Whereas in Nightmare on Elm Street, if you die in your dream, you die for real. And it'd be interesting to see all the Inception crew taking on Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. Nice.
Inception on Elm Street.
Well, I reckon what would be cool is because last week we covered Friday the 13th, and this week we're doing Nightmare on Elm Street, and because they've both got such iconic like villains that like to pair them up and put them in a movie together.
Richard, that would never work. What are you talking about? They would never do that. Those characters will never have a team up movie. Cereal guy meme. Spits out cereal.
No, I would like to see a sequel which ignores let's do this again. That only 1 and 3 are canon.
Right.
And so let's follow on and
get Patricia Arquette back.
Yeah, get Patricia Arquette back. Do it. And do it, AJ.
I'll get her on the horn.
Kissing Kate Barlow herself. Get her back. But yeah, I want to explore the idea of Nancy being like a guardian angel in the dream world.
That's the second reference we've made to holes in these two episodes.
What are we going to reference? We referenced the book the first time, the movie this time.
Next week we'll reference the
coming next week, the Holes VR experience.
No, there are 2 sequels to Holes. There's
Small Steps.
There's Small Steps, which I've got. I could show you it right now. It's behind me.
Do it.
All right. Fuck.
AJ doesn't have his headphones in, so I can say anything to you right now. AJ is my best friend.
I'm back. Here
I
it
didn't
is.
notice you'd gone, sorry.
Small Steps, which I read once when I was 12, and it's so insanely different from Holes that it's just not very interesting.
Really?
Well, it's just not about the same thing at all. But there's also Stanley Yelnatz's Guide to Camp Green Lake.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about this? Holes would be a great one for Generic Movie Podcast on our Patreon. Maybe people should suggest that.
Yeah, so that's my and I mean like Dream Master, Dream Angel. Oh.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like you're bringing it back to that idea and getting Langenkamp back on board. What's she up to these days?
She's she does like special effects and stuff.
Interesting. That's cool. What a cool career trajectory that is.
Yeah. Let me tell you what she did. So she was the special makeup effects coordinator on Dawn of the Dead, Cinderella Man, The Cabin in the Woods, and Evan Almighty.
God, she looks like she's 20. I've just googled her.
Wait, I wonder if she's done VFX for anything we've covered. Well, she was in Hellraiser Judgment. Remember that? She had like a tiny cameo, but she was in like
wow.
old lady makeup.
Yeah, because she eternally looks 20, so they wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah. She also produced a documentary herself called I Am Nancy.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah. Which maybe we'll watch one day.
One day.
When we watch Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street Legacy.
Let's do it.
All right. Anyway, that's the fucking podcast.
Oh, shit, is
right
that
there.
it?
Yeah. I mean, we'll be back. Don't worry, we'll be back next week. To do, the podcast.
We're doing Freddy vs. Jason and the remakes next week, so tune in for that. But other than that, thank you very much for listening, everybody. What should we do rankings next week? So let's do a definitive. This is my Friday ranking. This is my Nightmare ranking, and this is my Freddy vs. Jason ranking. So we'll do that next week to fill time as we talk about 3 movies instead of 8 to 10 or 7 to 10. And yeah, so thank you very much for listening. Let us know what your favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film is, and which franchise you prefer. It is interesting to say. Yeah, I agree that I prefer Friday the 13th as a franchise, but A Nightmare on Elm Street has better movies in it.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, thank you for listening. Find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. I still haven't written these down. Remember I said I was going to write these down so I could just read them off? I never did that.
Yeah.
You can also join the Cult Pop Show Discord where you can chat with us. You're about to go play a Friday the 13th video game with one of our Discord members, which I was going to join.
Are you?
No, I have not, because I forgot to download it and it is now too expensive for me. So sorry, Gas Cadet. Well, let's play something else sometime. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, everybody, and find us all those places. Support us if you can. Share the podcast around. I want everyone to listen. Remember when we did this? Share this podcast with 2 of your friends, and then get them to do that too. And if you do that, well, we just might intercept all the Elm Streets of all the world.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Welcome everybody to the post-credit scene. This is a segment brought to you by our Patreon, or our patrons on our Patreon, where if you go to www.patreon.com/cultpopshow right now and donate $5 or more, you too can send us a question or a topic to discuss in this segment, along with a bunch of other, perks as well, but that's one of them. So today's post-credit scene comes to us from Ryan Eastman, who says, "Glad to have joined the cult. I've been watching a while on YouTube under the username Gas Cadet. I usually leave nice comments," which he does. He does leave nice comments. "And I thought I'd join the cult to support y'all and get extra episodes. I'm a really big fan of movie posters, almost to the same obsession as you guys with movie titles. So I guess my question is, what's your favorite movie poster? Mine is 1978's Dawn of the Dead. I collect a lot of movie posters that I rarely display. I just like collecting them." Yeah, man. When I was a teenager, I would get them from the Video Easy, New Zealand's Blockbuster answer, and they would be selling them. They'd be like free or like $1, and you'd get a bunch of posters which weren't that cool because they were used to sell DVDs and not just genuine movie posters. So I stopped collecting them after a while, but I had a few and I really liked them. But
Same.
Yeah, what are your favorite movie posters?
I don't know. I really like ones that are just. It's cool when you get one that's like a cool piece of artwork. Like The Thing is a classic.
Yeah.
With the
Jaws is a
Marina,
classic,
Mariner type thing, and it's like a light coming from his head. That's a very iconic one.
All the answers are like all the classic ones. There, next question. No, but I really liked the Last Jedi poster, the one of like Luke and Kylo's face that's being interrupted by Rey's lightsaber. I also probably the weirdest poster that I really like is that Lilo and Stitch poster with all the Disney characters like cowering around the corner from Stitch, and it's like there's one in every family. I really dig that. That's really cool. Any more that you can think of that you really like?
The Midsummer poster is very striking. I always thought that was
Mm.
quite a cool one. What else have we got?
The Ant-Man poster's a classic.
Yeah,
That
man.
was so great. Where he's like, it's just a white screen with a tiny little Ant-Man in the middle of it. That was really good.
Yeah, I also really like when like you can get multiple movie posters that go together. Like
Mhm.
Back to the Future trilogy is a classic one where it's like it's the same format, and like the Dark Knight trilogy, how they all had one that was like the bat symbol. First one was like just the symbol, then it was on fire, and then it was like a hole you're looking out of. I like the idea of being able to put like a trilogy of posters like alongside each other.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think I think that's really cool. There's also those really cool Back to the Future minimalist posters that are just diagrams of the time travel in them. That I think
like I've got
really nice.
3 minimalist Jurassic Park posters in my house, which are quite cool.
That's cool. That is cool.